Welcome to Found in Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one chapter, this case, at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hey, Brandon.
Brandon.
Good to see you after such a long while, actually. Well, we've seen each other, just not hit record beforehand.
Right.
This has been a very hectic, crazy, busy springtime and into the summer. We're now past the solstice.
Yeah. Officially summer now.
Yeah, I think it was at least a month and a half between us recording the previous episode and this one.
Yeah, it's been quite a season.
It's been more than 1 week since you looked at me. Okay. Listener Brock will have enjoyed that joke. He's an all-star. So this week we are, I want to say though, like in the preceding few weeks or imprecise amount of time, our conversations about Hebrews, preparing for these episodes, as well as just reflecting on it, like going about my day and life and settling into the town that we now live in. These conversations in this translation has been particularly sticky for me, just in terms of like output. Like the therefore of this has been haunting me in a really good way. So I'm grateful for this, and also a bit surprised because Hebrews is in part known for how esoteric and strange, and I guess maybe the word arcane is appropriate for certain stretches of it. So I'm grateful for your work on this and hopeful that we can be faithful to pop it open for everybody else.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, it's similarly for me. Like, I've been thinking about it a lot, and it's been informative for other conversations I've been having with other people, and yeah, it's been cool.
Awesome. Well, everybody, we are talking this week about Hebrews chapter 1. We're going to be doing Hebrews one chapter or so at a time instead of our preceding experiment of topical. So if you haven't had a chance to read Brandon's translation, for those watching, we're going to have it up on the screen. For those of you listening, it's always good to give it a read. We'll have links in the episode notes for both a more printable PDF with all of the footnotes, as well as a mobile-friendly version that just has endnotes instead, which makes it a pain to get down to the footnotes or the endnotes, but it's easier to read the actual thing. So be sure to check those out. Hit pause if you need to and give it a read. Hey everybody, welcome back. Brandon, I would love for you to begin by, how do you feel about reading the whole chapter? It's not a very long one, so we're going to do a paragraph at a time long, and then work our way through them. What are you feeling?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. After God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets long ago in many pieces and in many ways, in these last days he spoke to us through a Son, whom he designated as heir of everything, and through whom he made the age. Since the Son is the shining projection of his praiseworthy presence, and the engraved image of his fundamental nature, and he sustains everything with his powerful speech, he sat at the prestigious right hand in high places after accomplishing a cleansing of deviations. So he became as much more important than the messengers as he has inherited a superior name compared with them. You see, to which of the messengers did God ever say, "You are my son, today I have birthed you"? Or again, "I will become a father to him, and he will become a son to me"? But when he brings the firstborn into the inhabited land again, he says to have all God's messengers bow down to him. And while he says for the messengers, the one who makes the winds his messengers and fiery flames his attendants, in contrast, for the Son he says, "God, your throne is throughout age after age, and the scepter of your reign is a straight scepter. You loved justness and loathed quarrelousness. Because of this, God, your God, anointed you with oil of celebration beyond your partners. Also, you laid the foundation for the land at the beginning, Lord, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will come to ruin, but you continue on, and the entire things will wear out like clothing, and you will fold them up as if they were a robe, and they will be replaced like clothing. But you are the same, and your years will never come to an end. But for which of the messengers has he ever said, sit at my right until I place your enemies as footstools for your feet? Aren't they all attending winds who are sent to serve among those who are going to inherit liberation? Word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Yeah. Wow. What a what a peculiar way to start a letter.
Uh,
It really does feel like I've just cannonballed into the deep end of the Hebrew imagination
mm-hmm. I
from
mean, it just,
2,000 years ago.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many exactly. I haven't counted, but something like a dozen Hebrew Bible quotations just got thrown in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so one of the founding, or I guess foundational priorities of the author of Hebrews in particularly the first like half of the letter or sermon or whatever this is, uh, is the way in which Christ's supersedes isn't quite the right word, but is like has a particularly almost cosmic or supreme resonance with a lot of the key points to like if you're going to shore up an argument in the most of the Judaisms of his day, you're going to appeal to something like celestial beings such as what we typically call angels, or you're going to appeal to the Torah or to the ancestors like Abraham, or you're going to appeal to Moses or the temple. Like these are fundamental things that you can like, John Wesley had the, four the quadrilateral of how to like come to a belief or conclusion is like what um, experience, reason, tradition, and scripture. And there were, in their imagination, like tradition and scripture actually take on these other elements here of like temple and ancestry and angels. So that's what he's doing, or she. We're gonna go with she for the author of Hebrews. um,
We're just going to assume it's Priscilla
that's
without
right.
making an
Yeah,
argument for it.
it's a recreational and but sincerely hoped for
Mhm.
answer to the question. Um, yeah, so that kind of what he's launching. She is launching into. Good lord, immediately stepped in it.
Come on, Brandon, get with it.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Brandon.
Um, yeah. I mean, there's this appeal to, yeah, all these things, and we normally appeal to these things, but this is a little different than how we normally ground our ideas together.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, stay
Mm-hmm.
with me, everybody. I
Yeah.
mean, this really is the kind of the thesis of the book is that there's something unique about Jesus that I don't know what word to use because it's not supersedes exactly like what you've known before. Maybe
Sure.
um, a clarity that is not as easy to find in these other things where you have to like pick pieces here and there and these other
Mm-hmm.
places through messengers and later on through priests like this temporary stitching together of like priest after priest after priest in the line of Aaron.
Yeah.
Um, but there's an enduring quality uh, where you don't need multiple messengers
Yeah.
anymore because you have the Son. You don't need multiple priests anymore because you have
Mm.
this priest. You don't need like it's yeah. I think that's kind of the becomes the thesis, and then the so what of that gets teased out later. It doesn't
Yeah.
really get to that here, but
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a dicey thing to do. We talk about like liberation being one of the controlling like things that we turn to in these conversations, and in this case, it's worth noting that this is this author is not doing this out of any sense of like Judaism is the old thing now. It's really common to hear Christians talk about like, oh, the God of the Old Testament, and like, oh, they were all about laws and rules and earning their way to God.
mm-hmm,
That's all on an anti-Semitic spectrum.
mm-hmm,
Whether it's thought of
every bit
that,
of
it's
it.
not. Even people who really like have a strong I feel like I heard a lot of those things growing up. M- Most from people who also have a weird Zionistic fetish of protecting the militant power of the modern state of Israel.
Hmm.
They're like really into Israel being able to kill everybody and um, like use all this language about uh, Christian scriptures, seeing the Hebrew scriptures through a lens of like, but whatever, the Hebrew stuff is weird, dark, and like backwards, and that is not what the author here is trying to do at all. So that's why we're being a
He
little weird
constantly
about.
appeals to it to prove to show what she's trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. A- and it comes across as peculiar to us, I think, in coming out of American 21st century evangelicalism, because the way arguments were brought about, particularly among Protestants, is proof texting, not
Mm,
reading the total flow of an argument, a conversation, um, or a story. It's a sort of anti-literature way of arguing,
mhm,
and so to hear appeals to more conspicuously living parts of the tradition, like the institution of a priesthood, the institution of mediating beings such as angels, um, the the something like the temple. This is a much more, I would say, vibrant and open-ended way of, and probably more human way of holding a religious tradition. It's something that um, I think our sisters and brothers on the other side of the Tiber in the Roman Church have much less anxiety about, because they have a bit more of a polyphony. Like they hear in stereo better than Protestants typically do. Um, and so these arguments, I've chosen to let Hebrews sort of polyphony be an invitation to stretch my like proof texty instincts from Protestantism.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. We don't know what to do with Bible quotations because in Scripture, typically, because what the authors are doing is not proof texting.
No, no.
Um, it's trying to jog your memory, really. Like, remember all this stuff that you know, like surrounding context and everything. Like, keep that in mind here as we're having this discussion, and not just like, well, it says this thing. End of conversation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a window into the rest of the context of um,
Hmm.
that one verse.
Right.
Yeah. And so the first place that she's wanting to demonstrate Christ as the tuning fork, as the center, as the you say focus. What was the word you used for it?
I don't even remember. Yeah.
the fullness of this part of of their tradition um, is with what we typically call um, angels. That does the angel
I was gonna say
language.
you keep talking
Yeah,
about
I
angels. I
know,
don't
and
see the word angels
that
anywhere.
word is not there. So you've got
Yeah.
messengers
Right.
throughout this, and then winds in like the final verse of chapter one. Um, what the hell, man?
I mean, so angels, the Greek is angelos, and so angel is just angel, angel. It's just taking the Greek word and putting it into English letters. It's not actually translating. The word angelos means messengers and can mean human messengers. Um,
Hermes was a
based on
messenger.
context.
Yeah, was an angel. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, he's got me thinking about Hermie from Rudolph. That little elf guy.
Okay.
But
Oh, him. Really? He's called her. Oh my god, that's fantastic.
yeah, yeah. I want
Was
to be
not
a
expecting to go
dentist.
there.
Anyway, sidetrack here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so that's what the word means. And so my translating it as messengers is not inherently trying to say it's not angels. Like, sure, maybe it's angels, but the word is messengers. And so it could be a celestial being messenger, or it could be, as it explicitly says, as it's quoting Psalm 104, winds and fiery flames. Like, there's lots of different ways that God sends messages, and the agent or medium of that message is an angelos, a messenger.
Yeah.
So a variety.
Yeah, yeah, where earlier expressions of Judaism had, and it continued on, but like seraphim and Nephil, like there were these different kind of ways of speculatively categorizing these these like holy energies that convey the divine to the world or bring order to it or move history around. They're all kind of speculations of how God um, gets things done. Sometimes
Hmm.
there's talk in the Hebrew stories of like an angel or one of these energies being assigned to oversee a different region or political units. Sometimes it's um, angels coming to like bring a message to people or have dinner with somebody or whatever. But also
Hmm.
the earth and the almost like the elements have can also be categorized into this. So like angelos language, messenger language is really by choosing to translate this as messengers or and then as winds later on. Um instead
That's
of
a different
gloss
word. That's actually talking about wind.
yeah,
Quoting Psalm 104, talking about natural phenomenon.
but
Yeah.
that's usually translated as spirits. So it's kind of coalescing
Not in this
together.
context.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
it is the same word, but it's very clear from the context that it's talking about wind. And
Yeah.
so pretty much everybody translates it as
Oh,
wind
good.
there.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, because the sort of all of these like speculative expressions of how God um, moves around in the world and partners with fundamental energies of like elements and, as well as what we might call principalities and powers, what we might conventionally call an angel, what some it might just be a person being used by
Hmm.
God to bring a message, like that is the most like close to the
Hmm.
earth, close to daily life way of understanding it, but it includes all of these things. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I
If you look at the context here, it talks about God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets. Like the prophets are messengers.
hmm
Like
Yeah,
And
it's
so
right
yeah,
there in the first verse.
winds and fire and prophets are the kinds of messengers that are explicitly named in this chapter.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, include angel if that makes sense. Yeah, that's fine. Point is that Jesus Christ is different than any of the other kinds of messengers.
Yeah, that's thank you. That is the central thrust of this is um yeah, whether it's prophets as messengers like in verse 1 or seemingly something that isn't human like in verse 5 where it says to which of these or she says which of the messengers did God ever say you are my son today I birthed you, or at the end of the chapter when it's about winds like Jesus Christ is the fullness of like if you want a elemental mediator that's also personal, that's also deeply Jewish. You get all of these things in the Son. You get all these things in this Christ
Mhm.
reality.
Right.
So, yeah, if it makes you squirm that he's not using angels, that's fine. That's probably appropriate. Um, and see that there is a plurality of like almost like Priscilla is mashing the keyboard of what all she's talking about. Just
Mm,
like we're gonna put all these ideas into one word here.
yeah, because it is a broad word, and even we've talked about the work of Michael Heiser, who I am not on board with everything he says by any means,
Hmm.
but he knows what he's talking about as far as how the, the authors of the Hebrew Scriptures would have thought about and
Yeah,
celestial being language, angels and demons, or cherubim and all seraphim, all these other things which are not same things. But
right.
he's very clear, like angel, messenger. Can't think off the top of my head what the Hebrew word is for it.
Hmm.
That's not kind of being. It's a role. It's messenger,
Ah,
and
wow.
and so yeah, maybe that messenger is celestial being. That's not saying like it's not like the counterpart of human.
Yeah.
It's the counterpart of teacher or doctor. It's like what function do you play as whatever kind of being you are?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And so also for all of you who have found some skepticism or apprehension about believing in angels or demons, there's room in this way of translating it for that as well. Like there's space,
Yeah.
there's room for everybody in this way of translating it. And
Yep.
frankly, it's about just listening to ancient literature more than like
Hmm.
helping each of our customs feel safe.
Yeah. 'Cause I don't want to erase and say, well, I know as a
Yeah.
21st century Western,
Hmm.
person that there's no such thing as like whether that would be correct or not.
Hmm.
Trying to read my understanding of the universe back into this ancient text is not what we should be doing. We should be trying to understand what the author and the original audience would have thought about it. And then we can
Yeah.
do with that whatever makes sense to us, but we can't if I'm going into it trying to poke holes into it to begin with, like that's just let it say what it's gonna say, and then do with that what you're gonna do with that.
Preach. Well, we've got a little limited time this morning, so let's keep going on here. I want to acknowledge a few. Um, there's translations to like shake us loose from religious conventional language, religious technical language. That can those inherited words can sometimes fog up our spectacles and keep us from seeing a bit more vibrantly. And so, one of the translation shifts you've done is in verse 3, praiseworthy presence. What's going on there?
Hmm. Yeah, that's where it's traditionally glory.
Hmm.
Um, and it's an interesting word. Like glory might be the dictionary word that might be most appropriate, but because there's all of this theological baggage attached to that word, I try to avoid it
Yeah.
and find other ways to convey what it's getting at in context. So, the doxa, the Greek word, is really at its core, it's about praise, um, or the praise or the worthiness of being praised, praiseworthiness, um, the sense of being visible, being public, being held up to view to see what's worth admiring
Yeah. Yeah.
and emulating. Um, and there's often in scripture, particularly in books like John and Hebrews, the sense of presence, like thinking about the divine presence in the temple, the glory of the Lord being in the temple.
Yeah.
Um,
It
so
has coordinates.
yeah, so that feels like the what's being shown here is this the light. The Shekinah is not from the Bible; it's from like Middle Ages Judaism. Is that word?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that's the visible light that represents God's presence in the temple. Is what that word is referring to. So it's talking about the since the sun is the shining projection of His praiseworthy presence. It's that visible aspect of God's praiseworthiness and being present with us.
Hmm.
That's what the sun is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It is transcendent immanence. Is like you're not trying to say praiseworthy presence is the only or best way to translate doxa. It's just
no.
this is a good way to do it here without just shorthanding it into this word that is so partisan and
Hmm.
hazy like glory.
Yeah. And correct, like it saying project
Yeah,
the
it's a
shining
fine
projection
word.
of his glory. It works. It
Yep.
means the right thing. But then, yeah, because especially particular strands of Christianity have attached all this other things to that word. I'm trying to disconnect it from all those assumptions.
Right.
And yeah.
It's fascinating. Like you were bringing up the temple presence, right?
Hmm.
And one of the peculiar things about the Jewish people to their neighbors was that they didn't have a graven image. They
Hmm.
they did not have a physical manifestation of their God in their temples or holy places. And so, right there next in the verse, since the sun is the shining projection of his praiseworthy presence and the engraved image of his fundamental nature, he is both the Shekinah presence in the temple and for that part of us that craves a physical manifestation in the middle of a temple. Hey, there he is.
Hmm.
But he's like, it's
Yeah.
fully him. It's
That's
not just a
Christ.
statue. It's the fullness of his
Right.
identity, of his personhood.
Yeah. And that's like the full humanity piece. Like in the garden, God placed the Adam, the
Hmm.
human, as the image of God, the engraved image. Like all humans are
Yes.
the engraved image of God. And that's part of why a stone or wood is seen as problematic because it's like, no, 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 you already have living images walking around. That's you.
Yes. To bow to
And
the divine source of each person and call to participate
mhm,
in the life of God as the Eastern Church in particular developed language for. That
mhm,
is what it is. And we do that through, as Christians, we do that through Christ. Like it is
yeah,
almost like um, letting the Christ energy resonate in us. Like if you want to know how to be the image of God, look to the guy who was the image of God. Like
yeah,
we can point back to
for
him later
you.
on. She says but we do see Jesus, right?
Right. Yeah. For the you theology nerds out there who know the term hypostatic union, the concept of Jesus being both fully God and fully human and somehow mashing that together. The Greek word where we get hypostatic
Hmm.
uh, is the word that's translated nature or fundamental nature here.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's great. Yeah, he became like us so that we could become like him was one of the early formulations of Christian salvation. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, here we have it like nodded to here. This what seminary people would call an Adam Christology or something to that effect. So yeah, thanks for loosening up our thinking about glory. Let's see, we've got a few minutes left. Else do we want to touch on here? Um, Anything else you wanted to elaborate in that first paragraph?
No, it seems, I think we've touched on it a little bit. Yeah.
Hmm. I want to acknowledge verse. Well, one thing we're going to be regularly looping back through the first verses of Hebrews 6, which says like
Hmm.
really um, the first room of Christian formation and discipleship is some of these fundamental concepts about Christ. Like everything else, the laying on of hands and baptism and like what we would say in our time, communion or bishops or um like
Yeah.
all these other things, that's all later on. That's not necessarily more important or more complicated. The first thing is getting um getting making sense of Christ and letting that be how we love other people. Like if you can't love other people
Mm.
through the Jesus thing, right?
Yeah.
Um
Love, peace, unity based on
yeah,
who Christ is and was, like that
thank you.
is the foundation. All these other like theological concepts, it even lists resurrection as one of the secondary
Yeah,
things. If if you're putting resurrection even before love and peace and unity, you've got it backwards.
yeah, exactly. Like it's not to demean any of those questions, but they're all, you know, gloss and chaff if we don't
Hmm.
have um love. Like you can't participate in the divine life apart from love. And a
Hmm.
liberating kind of love is, I think, where Priscilla goes um,
Right.
as we go on. So to just acknowledge that here, that um, a lot of these other things that she's exploring are all like, if they feel too, if you're looking for the therefore for us, which isn't a wrong question, but it can be a debilitating question sometimes. That's what helps me. What helps me is just remembering, hey, this is about um, like the tune, discerning the tuning fork, to tune the instrument of my whole self, to to live the song of Christ, right? And
Mm.
this work of like him being the engraved image of his fundamental nature. It's like everything else is rock and roll after that. Um,
Mm.
and so some of these other things I want to end the episode on are outworkings of that. And that would be, um, well, for starters, in verse 9, you've got, um, you, thank you. You loved justness and loathed lawlessness. Uh, those are not the typical translations. Is that usually righteousness and loathed lawlessness? What's there?
Yeah. Yep. That's typically a lawlessness.
Hmm. Yeah, what's wrong with righteousness and lawlessness? And how does it help me see Jesus, be Jesus better?
Yeah. Well, lawlessness is from a anti-Semitic history. Um,
Okay, yeah, just not going to complicate
so
that
this,
one. Yeah, because it really isn't more complicated than that.
yeah. So it's talking about not disregarding Torah,
Yeah,
and and that's it.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, so it's not about refusing to follow rules, which is what you hear when you say lawlessness. It's
Mm-hmm.
regarding Torah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and you loved justness. Righteousness is fine. Again, correct, but it's become so filled with baggage and has become a religious technical term. There's no such thing as righteousness in any other concept besides Christianity.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
not it's no one knows what that means if they're not like deep in the church. And I would even go as far as to say many people in the church probably don't really know how to describe what it means other than just like behavior.
Yep.
Um, or going through a bunch of like spiritual loopholes to be treated as if you behave well, even if you don't. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it becomes in more Calvin derivative um strains of Christianity. It becomes sort of the like drag I wear to get into heaven or something like that. It's really or a costume.
okay,
Yeah, I
all
don't know why I
right,
use the word drag, but
yeah,
yeah, it's like yeah, God doesn't see you, he sees Jesus, and that's how you get in because you have Jesus's righteousness, which is just horseshit.
yeah.
It's
But
not
what
what's
it's talking
happening.
about
It makes God
is
deluded. Anyway,
alignment.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Alignment with Torah, like just being just. Like you talk about justified margins, it's straight on both sides. You talk about a right angle, it's a straight angle, which is so right, just, it's all the
Hmm.
same thing. Related
In
words
English, yeah.
in English, and it's that's why justice and justness and righteousness and right are all appropriate translations because in English they're all related.
Yes.
But we separate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Historically, they're related. Like justification is being made righteous, and if you don't know that that's those are related concepts, they're like, why a different word? But it's not really. Yeah, it's related, but
Yeah.
so in the Greek and the Hebrew, it's the same. Like there isn't a separate word for them. It
Hmm.
sounds so different, but it's this sense of alignment, being straight along the path. Hora is from the word or instruction, but the verb form of it is like shoot an arrow
Yeah.
uh, in a straight line. So you love being traveling straight along the path that Hora faces out. The opposite of that is disregarding Torah, right? So
Hmm.
they're intimately connected concepts.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And with that, because Torah isn't just a manual for individuals to like not get their hands slapped, it is a covenant. Um, it is a community document. It's not a my document, right?
right,
It
right.
is a part of it's a community binding, community creating, and community expanding thing. So there's a fundamental socialness
Hmm.
um, to language of Torah, and then language like you're using here, language of um, justice and righteousness. Even like all those things still should have a sense of socialness to it. And that's what we're going to see later on with like language about that's usually holiness. That's actually fundamentally about how you um, live as one and bring
Hmm.
mutual healing and liberation together. Unity
Right.
in the neighborhood together is really what it's about. And so we to translating it as Torahlessness does a number of things here in addition to the like we're gonna like show the Semitic nature of what's going on here, but it also, if you have a sense that Torah is communal, we're gonna hear that hopefully resonating here instead of like rule breaking, which is just such a fundamentally bad paradigm for understanding what Christianity or Judaism is quite about. It includes something like that, but it's really not what's happening here.
Mm. Yeah. Which relates to the shift, the very last word of this chapter of from salvation to liberation.
Yes, yeah, expand on that. Let's wrap on 14.
Yeah. Um, at least salvation isn't incorrect dictionary wise, but the way we hear that is I go as an individual to heaven when I die instead of to hell when I die.
Yep.
End of what that means. And like you said, this is not inherently about individuals. This is about a community of people who are is made up of individuals, but it's not focusing on the individuals. And so
Right.
this is talking about this sense of this is we're creating, Christ is creating a community, a way of being as an entire people that promotes liberation, that
Yes.
promotes justice, that makes it good. There's blessings, if you want to use that word,
Yeah.
uh, good gifts
Hmm.
for everyone. Everyone gets what they need and is part of this love and peace and unity that's being talked about here.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the injustice that happens, the oppression that happens, the violence that happens, we're being saved from those things, from being indebted based on financial debt
Yeah.
or social debt,
Yeah.
to have to like make things right when we couldn't possibly actually repair the harm that has been caused by individuals or as a community, and then being indebted in that way. So we're being released from that obligation. Like, let's start over. Let's make it good from here on out. Like,
Hmm.
all of that is liberation from the burdens of all of that.
Yes.
If you want to include what happens after we die, and that, I sure it is forming that trajectory, but it starts now and here.
Yeah. Preach. Preach. Yeah. You said in the end, that's not what going to heaven is not what salvation is about. I'd say it is actually about what it's about in the end. Like union with God is what happens in the end. What it means today, which is not the end, hopefully,
Mm,
is bringing that finale for each of us and the cosmos into the world, letting that union with God, that at home with the Lord that Paul speaks about, of whatever the hell that means, being held in love, as our entheogen using folks talk about. Like there is a deep energy of homecoming that mystics long for and have touched, that is meant to energize the kind of society and community and neighborhood that we live in here today. That's why salvation cannot be limited to what happens in the end, but what happens in the today, because it's all liberation
yeah.
with every head bowed and every okay. Okay, you know what? We got to wrap this thing up. Thank you guys and gals and everybody for joining us this wonderful morning. We appreciate your companionship on this journey. The easiest way to support Found in Translation is to leave us a rating or review on whatever app or player you are enjoying this on. It makes it easier for more people to find the show. The second best way is to become a sponsor. You can do it for just $5 a month. When you do that, you get comment access on the Translations Google Doc and the satisfaction that you're supporting exceptionally nerdy independent media. You can find the link to join the community in the show notes. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced by Perry FM on unceded Chinook and Kalapuya lands. Goodbye, Brandon.
Brandon.
Bye, everybody.